everybody. How are you today? Good. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I know it's a busy time of year for everyone, and probably that's why we have a little bit of a more intimate group this evening, which is fine. It's an opportunity actually to maybe, be a little more personal. If you have any questions that are more specific to your own situations, we like to encourage you to take this opportunity and have them answered. We have an awesome panel here this evening. These are some of the professionals that we work with all the time, and we can really tell you they're reliable and some of the best people in the industry here tonight. So, as you know from our handouts, we have a real estate attorney, Ali Alavi, with Alavi and Braza, who is now walking off the stage. He's an expert in real estate law. He's been doing it for over 13 years and counting. He's also a co-host of the radio show on WBZ 1030. What's it called again? Real Estate Radio Boston, thank you. Which is on Saturday evenings at 8 p.m. And with him is another co-host of WBC's 1030, Real Estate Radio Boston, Rick Shearer. He's with MSA Mortgage, and he is a mortgage planner. So basically, whatever your mortgage needs might be, he's the person to call on. He's happy to answer your questions and make sure that you're in the best situation for your needs. And tonight, he'll be talking a little bit about condo conversions and what you need to know if you are considering doing one as far as the financing goes. And then we have Kelly Weber, who is our right-hand woman for staging and interior design, and really is a person that adds value to her clients. And whatever kind of property you might have, condo, single, multifamily, she will be able to take your budget and work with it and basically leverage your assets, and her return is like 1 to 3 times whatever, or sorry, I should say 3 to 5 times whatever you put into it. So she's an awesome person to have on your team. All right, so here we go. Thank you again for coming. And again, if you do have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand or yell out, okay? Thank you.
Getting to the quote-unquote formal presentation of that we wanted to talk about with you on my side, which is really the legal side of things, is the concept of condo conversion. Under what circumstances are condo conversions are really doable? Are they realistic? And I defer that decision to a dialogue between yourselves and competent real estate agents. I think you need to have that dialogue with regards to whether it makes sense for you to be able to sell this property as a two-family, or whether you need to convert it into condos. And it's really driven by the market. It's driven by whether the cost of renovation outweighs the benefit at the end with the exit strategy. And there's very small, detailed things that we need to be mindful of when you're planning on doing that. And certainly I encourage you to talk to the real estate agents to figure out what your options may be. All right. Some of the things that you have to be mindful of: what is the process of converting a property into a condo? Well, and who's involved? Essentially, the people that are involved in putting together a condo conversion are, you're going to have a real estate agent involved, obviously, that's going to educate you in terms of what the market will bear, in terms of what your units are actually worth, whether they're renovated or not. The second individual that's going to be involved in this process is going to be a legal professional, and that legal professional is going to be able to tell you what the process of converting a property into a condo is. What are some of the documents that are necessary in order to be able to get put together? The length of time in which it takes in order to be able to put those documents together. Another individual that's going to be involved, which is absolutely critical to this process, is going to be an engineer and an architect. So they're going to be there in order to either tell you whether it's realistic and doable for you to be able to convert these units into condominiums. And if they are going to get involved, commonly we see engineers and architects are working in unison with one another in order to be able to accomplish the condo conversion task. And there's timelines and costs and processes associated with that. But once you've gone to your architect and you come to us, these are the three areas that we're going to be essentially addressing. One is the preparation of the master deed, declaration of trust and rules and regulations. Essentially, those are the legal instruments whereby you are declaring a particular property as a condominium. And you're basically telling the world in terms of what are some of the restrictions, some of the rules that they have to abide by, if there are parking spaces that are going to be associated with the units, how many parking spaces there are, if there are any balconies that are going to be exclusive to a particular unit, who's going to bear the responsibility, who's going to bear the cost of replacement of that balcony. If there's a basement in the unit and you're going to have designated storage spaces in the basement, whose storage space is whose, and again, who's going to bear the cost and expense of the repair, etc. So if there's a roof deck, who's going to be entitled to the use of the roof deck, and what the cost is for its maintenance, etc. So these are the four corners of the documents that will declare this particular property as a condominium are going to be defined in those three instruments: the master deed, declaration of trust, and the rules and regulations. The timelines that you have to allocate, as a rule of thumb, I would say that you have to allocate probably anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks on your architect's side in order to be able to put together your site plan and your unit plans. I think that's what you need to be mindful of. The cost associated with putting together the site plan and the unit plans and the unit plans are going to depend on the project itself. The complexity of the project, whether you're changing configurations, etc. And on average, we're seeing 3 to 4 weeks with regards to the plans for the site plan and the unit plan. The timeline that you have to allocate as far as putting together the condo docs, you're looking at, on average, about 2 weeks. And that's because we put together the original draft of these documents, and there has to be a dialogue between us, the engineer, and yourselves as homeowners to make sure that the documents are accurately reflecting what you thought they were going to reflect. So that's the general timelines of that. The second aspect of our involvement is preparation of the unit deed. If there has been construction going on in the unit, a limited warranty, and preparation of what's called a 6D certificate. It's a certificate that we will prepare that the trustee, i.e. declarant, i.e. yourselves, would sign, essentially stating that there is no outstanding assessments or condo fees against these units. And a tax letter agreement. That's something that quite often is forgotten. A tax letter agreement is essentially telling the prospective potential buyer that this unit is still being taxed as a two-family, or it's being taxed as a three-family. Because those units have not been recognized by the town of Somerville as a separate unit. And so therefore, the potential buyers need to cooperate with you in ensuring that they're paying their allocable share of real estate taxes, and they're going to cooperate with you, and their lender is going to cooperate with you. So it is a critical factor that shouldn't be left out in the process of the closing. And then, of course, once these units have gone on the market, then representation of the developer, the homeowner, in the sale of each individual unit. So those are really our three separate aspects of representation that we're commonly asked to be involved with. Your architect, I think I'm not sure how many of you actually picked up the handouts that were up front. I hope you all did, but we were supposed to have an architect sitting on our panel. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he was not able to join us. Yeah, and I think he would have a lot of valuable information to share with us. Quite frankly, it's a black box, and I'm not all that creative when it comes to that, so I enjoy listening to others that are creative in that arena. But Vanco Studio Architects is someone that we've partnered with. I've had the pleasure of working with them in the past, and they are very, very insightful. They're very creative. They think outside the box. And I was actually, before the seminar, I was talking to Carrie, and I said, well, how often do you really need a creative architect? And because, again, I don't know. And she said more often than you think. And so I think a good, competent architect, engineer is really critical to this process. The town of Somerville has what's called a condo review board. And so in order for you to actually effectively effectuate a condo conversion, you have to go in front of the board and you need to ask for a removal permit. You're not going to be granted a removal permit. You're going to be granted an estoppel permit, an estoppel certificate, if you will, if you have no tenants residing in your units. So if you have no tenants residing in your units, you're going to be granted an estoppel certificate, which means that you don't have to deal with a voluminous section of the law that went into effect in the early 80s. The spirit of the law, which, by the way, is not Somerville specific, it's the Commonwealth of Mass passed this quite some years ago, was to prevent homeowners from displacing tenants and sort of avoid undue burden on those tenants, okay? So if you have existing tenants in your properties, you have to follow very specific procedures in order to notify that tenant that you intend to convert your property into a condominium. There are timelines that you have to meet. Those timelines are absolutely critical to you being granted in the town of Somerville a removal permit and ultimately being able to successfully, without any issue, selling those units down the road. And I'm not going to get into the details. There's too many details there. But what I can tell you in broad brushstroke is that your tenant is they have to be provided notice either in hand or certified mail. They need to be told that you intend on converting these units into a condominium. And they then get a right of first refusal to purchase your units. Those units need to be provided to them at a fair market value, and they get a certain period of time to exercise on that first right of refusal. A condo conversion cannot start for a regular tenant in your unit until 1 year after the notice has passed. And if that tenant happens to be an elderly or a handicapped individual, 2 years has to lapse before you can effectively convert your property into a condominium. I don't think that none of this should discourage you if you're thinking about condo converting a property, but you should be aware of it. You should have, again, competent counsel and competent agents on your side to be able to guide you through your process. Please.
How long does a tenant have as right of first?
90 days. 90 days. Somerville is 60 days. So it's 30 days and then 30 days thereafter. So there are very specific towns that have changed the already broad Commonwealth regulations. So there's a whole slew of them, and I can give you that list if you wish. So with that said, let's see, Somerville Condo Review Board permits required. We already, I think, talked about that. The timing to draw up plans, you have to set aside about a month, as I mentioned. Timing to prepare the documents, 1 to 2 weeks. One of the key things that I want you to be mindful of, and again, this is based on the mistakes that we've seen others make, and that is, if you have your own counsel, if you have assembled an already existing team, and they've prepared the documents already, and they're planning on taking these documents to record, please tell them not to record the documents. If you're converting the condos, you have your plans drawn up, and you're and your documents have been prepared, please do not let them record those documents. And the reason I say this is because of a practical tip. Practically speaking, if these documents have been prepared, and you've looked at them, and we've reviewed them, and you've accepted and approved them, technically they can go on record. I don't think they should. And the reason I don't think they should is once you have these units under agreement, the buyer's counsel or the bank's counsel would want to review those documents to make sure that they meet their individual independent guidelines. And if you've already recorded those documents and you have to now abide by whatever changes that they may have based on whatever guidelines that they have, then we're going to have to do an amendment, and you're going to be incurring additional costs for preparation and recording of those documents. So, practical tip. Costs. I think if you look at it in a big picture sense, I think the amount of money that's spent in converting your property into condominiums versus the amount of profits that you will reap, I think one justifies the other. And what do I mean by that? I think the cost for plans, on average, you're looking at $3,000 to be able to draw plans, depending again on the complexity of the plan. Cost for documents depends on how many units there are. You know, anywhere between 2 to 4 units, I would say you should allocate anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000 for preparation of the documents. As far as recording costs, those are nominal. $225 would be for a master, for a declaration of trust, $125 for a master deed, $75 per plan that you have to pay for. So those are nominal costs. Seller representation, that's the third phase that I was discussing. You have to pay an attorney, preferably the same attorney that's doing a condo conversion for you, to actually represent you per unit and go to the closing for you. So there's a cost there. And of course, closing costs. Those are the same closing costs that you probably saw in your settlement statement when you purchased these properties. It's the same cost that you would have to pay: commission, tax stamps, etc. So bear in mind with regards to those costs. How much time do I have, Carrie? 2-3 more minutes. Because I mean, there's a whole bulk of other segments of my presentation. Yes, I'm sorry.
You left out typical legal costs for the end. You mentioned that you guys have to be paid, right?
No, sure. So the doc preparation cost is anywhere between, what's that? Do you want me to repeat the question? The question, can everybody hear or no? The question was, the question was, what are the typical legal fees that you should allocate? Because obviously I have to get paid. I appreciate that. The doc prep fee is something that we charge. So anywhere between, what I was telling you, that anywhere between 2 to 4 units, you should allocate anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000. Exactly. And then the separate and apart cost of seller representation, you know, the range is anywhere between $950 to $1,250 per unit is what you should probably allocate. There's a whole different segment of this presentation that I'm going to avoid and ignore because it was designed for individuals, and based on sort of the feedback that we've gotten from the audience, I think that none of you are perhaps thinking about selling the property that you're currently living in order to purchase another property. I think I'm getting more of a flavor that most of you have existing properties that you've utilized for investments, and you're sort of thinking about either converting into condos or selling it, etc. And by the way, just so you know, our CPA has arrived. He's sitting in the back, so if you have any CPA questions, I will defer to him. I think with that said, I'm going to conclude my presentation. I'll certainly be available throughout this whole presentation and afterwards to address any questions you may have, and hand the baton over to Rick Shear, my co-host and friend from MSA Mortgage.